Well, Resident Evil 9 is upon us now, and my Resident Evil 6 VO did better than I expected. I am not Naya Stone, and the algorithm craves continuity. And what better way to fill up the most controversial entry in the series than with the game that set the stage for it all the way back in 2009. Many of Resident Evil 6's problems can be laid at the feet of RE5, and with a potential remake on the horizon, now's the perfect time to see if it's this diamond in the rough that can be saved, or if it needs to be gutted like Resident Evil 3 was. RE3 did not need to be gutted, it's an amazing game, please don't yell at me in the comments, thank you. And kick things off with Chris and Sheva, Chris's new partner after the alleged death of Jill Valentine. Oh boy, we are gonna get to that, don't worry. Cavorting through the streets of a rural town somewhere in Africa, with Chris clearly having enjoyed the benefits of clean living and exercise after Wesker absolutely hazed him in the final scenes of Code Veronica. The male ego is a truly fragile thing. They're investigating reports of Las Plagas and other weird happenings of bioterrorism, and they're gonna get to the bottom of the dagnabbit. It's worth knowing that when this game came out all the way back in 2009, the internet wasn't exactly thrilled at the image of big, strong Chris Redfield coming to save a country full of people of color. It was one of the first controversies of its kind at the time. And well, I am not going to go into it or discuss it any further because I like my fragile sanity to remain intact. It is going to be very interesting to see how Capcom hails it should the remake materialize. Moving on to safer waters, we hit our first few combat encounters, along with a horde mode, which will test your ability to think creatively while trying to stay alive. The AI director is back in full force in RE5, making sure you get punished brutally should you begin to overperform, by making sure you never get overstocked with ammo or healing supplies. It clearly had me talking smack about it in my previous video.
Come on, man, that was like 3 days ago!
Or was it?
And rewarded me by making sure I was carrying one herb for the first hour of the game, for Chris and Sheva to stare at longingly every time they were given a new chest wound. That would be fine if... Okay, now's as good time as any to talk about your partner and the inventory. RE5 is the first game to introduce partner AI, and they're fine, except for one simple fact. They have their own inventory, and sadly, your partner, be it Sheva or Chris, donated their brain to T-Virus research upon joining the BSAA, and never sought a suitable replacement. Yet 9 whole slots in your inventory this go-around. This is far less of a problem if you manage to rope another living human being into playing a game that has tank controls in 2026. But commit yourself into the hands of the AI, you quickly discover the only viable strategy for managing their avaricious hunger for ammunition is to turn them into a pack mule. Carry all the weapons you're not using, but never let them near the ammunition or health. After that, we get our first encounter with the Uroboros test subject, fight which is clearly meant to call back to the Verdugo boss from RE4. Swapping out ice or fire because we're playing by Pokemon rules now, and this Tangler is gonna look like a Moltres by the time the incinerator is done with him. Once the cookout is over, we're back on the trail of Meowth. Seriously, I never realized Irving sounded exactly like Meowth until I wrote that bit, and now I can't unhear it. Who's hanging out with a mysterious stranger there's no way being subbed for a dramatic reveal later. So far, the game is fine. Definitely playable, and deja vu fun at times, without running into the pacing issues or insane set-piece exhaustion that plagued RE6. Question you're asking yourself more at this point is just, why? Why did Capcom look at Resident Evil 4, a game which even at the time was hailed as a revolution of the survival horror genre, and said to themselves, we should strip this back, because that's effectively what RE5 does. It doesn't innovate on RE4, beyond the partner mechanic, I suppose. Instead, it sought to refine to strip back what it saw was unnecessary. Your suitcase, the Tetris minigame, was dropped for 9 clear inventory slots, then is removed for end-of-level stores. Puzzles evaporated along with the gameplay features teased in early trailers. In almost every capacity, RE4 was gutted and streamlined. Some of this can be absolutely laid at the feet of the MT Framework Engine's limitations. Others because they simply clash with the design of having a partner beside you who could be a living, breathing human being. So you have to ask yourself, was it worth it? Did the partner mechanic really add so much to the game that we had to lose so much in time? But now the hunt for Irving is on. From here, it's just a lot of partner stuff. Kill bad guys, look out for traps, briefly get separated so you can unlock the path forward. Honestly, it plays pretty well. But if you want to stick a pin in the exact moment that Resident Evil franchise began to lose its way for the next decade, this was it. Fight your way through an underground passage, which is just the absolute worst if you're playing solo. And it's on to the game's next boss, Karimo, which I guess means we're back to the Pokemon jokes again, because that's the name of a Pokemon if ever I heard one. The fight itself isn't too bad, but don't get too comfortable because from there, it's straight onto a turret section, which was the style at the time. No, seriously, if you weren't old enough in 2009, I cannot stress enough to you how every game back then needed at least one turret section. It was just one of those things. Did we just do a boss? Well, too bad, it's time for another one. Oh, this one is less of an actual boss fight, more of a rail shooter, since you're still in a turret for the whole thing with unlimited ammunition. And all you can do is hold down the fire button until Nadesu decides he's over this whole being alive thing. Make it through that, and we're onto the culturally insensitive wetlands, where Capcom tries to hand-wave the fact that you're fighting barbaric tribesmen by explaining that the plaga causes the infected host to regress to a... Ow, okay, I said I wasn't getting into this. After that metaphorical minefield, we tracked down Irving, who is now on a boat giving his best villainous monologue. Seriously, his VA found out that he's only had to get 5 minutes in a Resident Evil game, but never told him not to chew the scenery, before he escapes solely for us to catch him loose immediately. Here he goes with a big brain move of gassing himself up with a BOW agent that turns him into a weird giant tentacle thing. And we're back to 5 buses with turrets. It's around this time that I asked myself, if you were the bad guy here, and you win, what exactly were your plans from this point forward? Just gonna roam the swamps as a giant tentacle fish? Get a bit part in a hentai? Seems a little short-sighted to me. But I suppose anyone who chooses to go up against Chris knows massive cannons can't be accused of being intelligent. Send Irving to Pokemon jail. Dude, they even have those? And we're back to more familiar territory. K-systems, weird bugs. It suddenly feels a lot more RE4 in here. But that doesn't last long as we're forced to explore several tribal ruins in an effort to progress, including a laser puzzle which I swear I can never clear without immolating myself or my partner at least once. This is the most Resident Evil the game has been so far, feeling like we're doing some clever, well-thought-out puzzles instead of just hitting levers and finding keys to progress. Pepe Karimu returns for another shot at the title, but we're far better equipped by this point to give a single fuck about him, especially when getting him stuffed and mounted leads to our cutscene with the game's real star, Albert Wesker. Holy hell, this absolute king. This giga chat of masculinity. Capcom said the last Matrix installment was 6 years ago, but who cares? Because black sunglasses and trench coats never go out of style. And by God, the moment Wesker opens his mouth, you will be pregnant with his child. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, temples and stuff. Whatever. We get an interesting lore drop with the Garden of Flowers that was used to create the original precursor to the C virus, the progenitor virus. From there, we're onto a giant underground research laboratory, because it wouldn't be Resident Evil without one of those. Oh, and there's a giant spider boss too. He's fine. Annoying, not particularly memorable. Also, he's not Albert Wesker, so we're moving on. That leads us to a facility for processing propane and propane accessories. It might sound like I've speedrunning the story at this point, and you'd be right, because there really isn't much to talk about a lot in these sections. Pull some levers, shoot some bad guys, do a little platforming. It's all terribly predictable at this point, and the game really doesn't have a whole lot new to show us. That is until we get to the boss, Uroboros Mkono. Some default Mulk is juiced up with the Uroboros virus, while Axela and a mysterious stranger monologue about how this is the next evolution of mankind. And believe me when I say this is the quit point for a lot of players. This fight is the absolute worst. I've done this fight multiple times, and it has taken up to 30 minutes, with you throwing bullets, bombs, harsh language, and your own goddamn shoes at him in an effort to bring him down. There's been deep dives, teardowns, and explanations for why this is, but the simple answer is, bring a rocket launcher. He will quickly realize that the power hentai is no match for a high-yield explosive. And before you know it, you'll be back to dodging Reapers and raised scaffolds in the next chapter. But none of that matters, because now it's time for the main event. The Muggy Olympics are on, and Wesker has already claimed every medal before the first event even began. Second place goes to Jill Valentine, who's been injected with the power of God and anime, along with a skin suit so tight she's gonna need an excavator to dig it out of her butt crack. But that doesn't matter, because we've got 7 minutes to play with Wesker, and that's all he can spare. First time you played this, you emptied every bullet you had at Wesker, don't lie. Only finding out later that the fight runs on a timer, and after 7 minutes, Wesker nopes out because he remembers he lit the stove on. That leaves us with Jill to fight in what is easily the most frustrating challenge the game provides, trying to shoot Jill's tits without actually shooting her tits. On higher difficulties, you'd be here until Crispus tried to yank it off, but kudos to Chris for resisting the urge to cop a feel, I suppose. Respectfully, of course. It's just a pain-in-the-butt fight that I really wish had been handled better. Plus, Jill looks amazing in that suit, and I wish we got to see more of it. You do get Marvel vs. Capcom free, but she's so low tier that nobody really plays her competitively, so good luck finding footage on that. Once the fight is over, Chris inadvertently proclaims his love for Jill by admitting he would rather let millions of people die than leave her side. He's just a big old teddy bear, isn't he? For here, the set piece express kicks in a high gear, and we're off to a boat. again. To play Tetris with shipping containers and fight off waves of increasingly well-cooked Majini, it's a solid difficulty spike if you're not prepared for it. And I can say from personal experience that if you attempted high difficulties, you'll be constantly running empty on health and ammunition. So make sure to save that last bullet for yourself. But we're closing in on the endgame, and there is no time for self-pity, especially when Wesker is reminiscing about that time he killed Oswald Spencer and became a literal supervillain. The tragedy of modern Resident Evil is that we will never see more of DC Douglas's Albert Wesker, which is just proof for living in the darkest timeline. Excella shows up to remind everyone that Jill wasn't the only one blessed with that prodigious cleavage, but even that isn't enough to satisfy the Uroboros virus, who Wesker clearly engineered to believe flat is justice. She walks into... Look, if I keep making dick and tentacle jokes about Uroboros every time it shows up, this video will be 3 hours long. So, in simple, just follow Chris and Shever as they make their way through the bowels of the ship, collecting guns and ammo so they can solve this problem the American way. Which, apparently, is pounding her to the ground with a goddamn satellite laser, because nothing kills like overkill, and too much is barely enough. Fight your way through a gauntlet of absolute Majini nonsense before getting our along-the-way rematch with Wesker. This fight is absolute comedy on so many levels. From exploiting his weakness of low lighting, for God's sakes, man, I know you're cool, but take your sunglasses off at night, to watching him lob actual Tomahawk missiles at you because he'll be damned if he lets Chris upstage him for even a second with that orbital laser crap. We take to the skies and let Wesker monologue long enough to suffer a fairly punishing QTE sequence before dropping him and ourselves into an active volcano, which isn't nearly as lethal as I was led to believe by common sense and basic high school physics. Wesker is still alive and completely unharmed by the act of being shot in the face and dropped from an airplane at 30,000 feet. Proving that with enough aura, you can survive just about anything. He takes a highly concentrated dose of Uroboros, which, judging by the visual downgrade he gets from it, proves he was already the perfect organism and you cannot improve on perfection. Anyways, nothing of particular interest happens on our way down to go fight him, and the journey is completely uneventful and very normal. Except for this part. The final fight is as gloriously over the top as you'd hope. Shoot him in the back, stab him in the face, terminate to his ass into a goddamn volcano. And if that wasn't enough, you blow him up with an RPG just to remove all doubt that this game was made specifically for an American audience. And that's it. We fly off into the literal sunset, just to prove this was an action movie first and a hard game a distant second. Good guys win, bad guys lose. What else do you want? The only question left is, can we fix it? Actually, yes. Very yes. And that's because there's not really much wrong with RE5 to begin with. 17 years later, this game holds up shockingly well. Drag a buddy in the plate with you and it gets even better because we're not hurting cats with partnered AI. Problematic issues aside, RE5 doesn't need to be rebuilt. The plot is deliciously cheesy and fun. The main character designs look great, and the story is the right mix of drama, action, and lore. What it needs is to be refined and built out mechanically. Inventory and loot needs to be restructured and expanded upon to make it feel more rewarding and dynamic. Smooth out the controls to a modern standard, and you're not just upgrading RE5. You're giving fans the worthy successor to RE4 that everyone was denied on the first go-around. You already gave us the sublime gameplay of RE9, Capcom. Now, just toss in a shirtless Wesker body pillow with the remake of RE5 and my life is yours.